virtual learners. I know that we're all stuck at home, but we want to get out and about. So over the next two classes, we're going to be taking a virtual field trip and doing some sightseeing. So I'm going to share my screen with you and kind of go over some historic landmarks, some brand new buildings, some record breakers, and basically we're going to use some of these topics for assignments as we go through our structures unit, which is going to be our first unit. So we're going to be building something, but we're also going to be doing some research, and this is going to be kind of like our first base of information, is kind of knowing what's out there. So no passports necessary. We get to travel. I'm going to board, and I'm going to be, all right, guys, we're going to be starting our tour in Japan. And the bridge that we're looking at right here is called the Akashi Kaikyo Bridge, and it was built in 1998. It was originally designed to be 12,825 feet long, which would make it the longest suspension bridge in the entire world. However, when it was being built, there was an earthquake, a massive earthquake, and it actually stretched the bridge out 3 additional feet. So it's actually the longest suspension bridge in the world, and it's longer than it was designed to be because they had to change it. It is so long that 4 Brooklyn bridges would fit in the same space. So if you guys have been on the Brooklyn Bridge, that'll give you an idea of scale. It's able to wrap all of its cables around the earth 7.5 times. That's how much materials they use to build this thing. There is a major fault line in between the 2 towers, obviously. There's a lot of rough currents and rough water and bad weather in this portion of the world, which is why they needed to replace their ferry system. So this bridge needs to be strong enough to stand up to all of that. And since I mentioned Brooklyn, let's head on over to Brooklyn next. So this is the view from the Brooklyn Bridge. Probably something that most of us as New Yorkers are familiar with. And the Brooklyn Bridge was actually built before cars were invented. They completed it in 1883. Now, even though cars hadn't been invented yet, 144,000 vehicles cross this bridge every day. Now, this was a very difficult bridge to build. You might notice that like cool spiderweb pattern that you see of all the wires. It's actually not a true suspension bridge. It's what's called a cable stay suspension bridge. It's actually a hybrid. It's really ahead of its time, even though it was built in the 19th century. It took 14 years to complete, and part of the trouble is that when they built underwater, they had built these large shapes called caissons, and people were going down in them and coming up and getting sick and sometimes dying. And they didn't know what it was. They called it caissons disease. Today we call it like the bends or decompression sickness, and we know it's because of the difference in pressure between underwater and above water. And it's something that divers, scuba divers, have to deal with when they go deep underwater. They come back up on a schedule. So they didn't know that back then, and a lot of workers died because of this sickness. All right, we are in Virginia. This is a very exciting bridge. It looks like a ramp, like a daredevil jump, but this is actually the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. So what you're looking at in this picture is part of the bridge section and 2 of the artificial islands that are connected by a tunnel. So instead of the cars going way up in the air and having boats go underneath the bridge like we have in New York City, they have a tunnel where the boats can pass over the cars. So the reason that they came up with this design is because it is right across the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. So this is a picture of it. These are several pictures, but you can see on the right next to the title, there's a picture with a line on it. That's the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay and the area where the bridge tunnel is. So the Chesapeake Bridge Tunnel was built in 1964, and it goes 17.6 miles. So it is a very long bridge. They would not have been able to build a tall bridge like that went across the entire mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. I've actually driven on it myself, and it takes about 20 minutes to go across. You can see on that picture on the bottom with the sunset that some of it has like a truss system around it, kind of like our bridge that we would take to go to like Robert Moses Beach. So it's a little bit different at different points. It's more of a system. And in the top and the middle, you can see that there's kind of like a map that shows how it's different in different areas, and it even has a little island at one point that they built some of the legs on. But let's go back to New York. This is the Chrysler Building. So when the Chrysler Building was built in 1930, it was the tallest building in the world, but it did not get that title easily. At 1,046 feet tall, it stole the title from 40 Wall Street. So basically what was happening during that time in history is that buildings were getting built taller and taller, and everybody wanted to have the tallest skyscraper. It was called the Race to the Sky. And Walter Chrysler, who was the CEO of the Chrysler Corp, the car company, that was their headquarters. He wanted to be the one with the tallest building. So 40 Wall Street came out with plans that were taller than the Chrysler Building, so he had them change the plans. But then the developers at 40 Wall Street found out that they were not going to be the tallest building in the world, and they changed their plans. And they just kept one-upping each other in the newspaper and changing their plans. So what happened is the spire, that little pointy bit at the very top, they built inside of the building in secret. And they opened their doors, and they let the building at 40 Wall Street be completed as well. And when they tried to take the title, they used a hydraulic jack and pushed the spire up through the roof, bolted it in place, and completed the building to claim the title. Now, it looks very similar to another famous building in New York, the Empire State Building. The way I always tell them apart is the shiny chrome top of the Chrysler Building has those arches. It's supposed to be kind of like the look of hubcaps, from the center hub of a car tire. And the gargoyles, you can see one on the picture on the right now, are supposed to kind of look like hood ornaments at the time. So they had those kind of like car design cues built into the structure to give it a little extra personality. And I think it really works. I really like the look of that building. We're going to stick in New York. And this is the Statue of Liberty. Now, when I was in 6th grade, my class actually took a trip to the Statue of Liberty. And I know that... when you guys go on field trips, you're always told, you are representing Sayville. Everything you do reflects on the future. So on behalf of the class of 1997, I'd like to sincerely apologize that you no longer can take a trip to the Statue of Liberty. My fault, our classmate messed it up. I didn't mess it up. Somebody else did. Basically, people missed the ferry on the way home. Anyway, very cool monument. If you've never been there, make reservations, climb up to the crown. Spectacular view. The lady part of the structure was built by an artist, and all of her skin is made out of copper. So if you look in that bottom right corner, that's how they actually put it together. They made these big wooden molds of just little parts of her. So you can see those people standing around that wooden frame with plaster over it. That's just her hand and her wrist. So you can get an idea of size. And they hammered the sheets of copper over her, and then they sent the sheets over to America, and they were riveted together. The inside of the Statue of Liberty is made out of iron, and it was designed by a really famous architect. His name was Gustave Eiffel, and he designed the skeleton that helped make her strong, and basically they hung the copper skin off of that iron frame. Now, Gustave Eiffel's name might sound familiar because of the Eiffel Tower. So he also designed a lot of iron bridges. Working with iron is what he's best known for. But the Eiffel Tower, which was built in 1889, is 986 feet tall, and it was the tallest standing structure in the world for many, many years. It actually stole the title from the Great Pyramids of Egypt. So all the way from the Great Pyramids of Egypt to the Eiffel Tower, we never had a metal structure built bigger than a Stone Age structure. So that was a pretty big accomplishment. And what made that possible is that they built all of the pieces in a factory and basically put it together kind of like a Lego set. All the pieces were what they call modular. It was very modern for its time. We don't really think of iron as a modern material, but it allowed it to be lightweight. Again, today we don't think of it as a lightweight material, but compared to stone, it was very lightweight. that open lattice or the open truss designs, that pattern that the metal makes allows wind to blow through it. And it was the first structure where they actually designed it so that the wind would not blow it over. It's pretty cool. Now we're going to go for another tower. But this time a tower that's known for its failures and not its accomplishments. This is the Leaning Tower of Pisa. So the reason that they built this was basically to show off. Back then in that region of Italy, you had to have a really cool church, and if you had a really cool church, then you'd want to have a really cool bell tower, and if you had that, you'd want to have a really big public plaza. And these big structures in your town were a way to show off affluence and show off that it's a great place to be. Now, right after they started building, they noticed that there was a problem, and basically one side of the tower started to sink because the ground underneath it wasn't strong enough. And they started like building the other levels kind of on an angle. If you look at the tall picture of the tower, it kind of looks like it's curved just a tiny bit. And it looks that way because all of the different levels are kind of built on an angle to try to like make the floor flat again, but that just did not work. Now, eventually what they did, if you look in the bottom right-hand illustration, they dug out underneath the tower and they secured the foundation. They basically took the dirt out and put concrete in. They held it up by wires, by big cables while they were doing all this work. And that is the way they kind of locked in the lean, and they fixed it. So they didn't straighten up the tower. They left it to be a leaning tower, but it does not move anymore. It used to move. And then right in the middle, you can see a nice big picture of the bell. So that's actually what it's for, is to have that bell. Back to America. The Windy City. We're in Chicago. This is the Willis Tower, formerly known as the Sears Tower. It was built in 1973. It's 1,454 feet tall, but if you add those television antennas up on the top, it goes all the way up to 1,707 feet tall. So this was the tallest building in the world when it was built. It had the tallest usable floor for a while as well, and it's a very unique building. So here's some other images, some other ways to look at it. I'm looking at that colorful diagram down at the bottom right now. And the way that the building was built is in tubes. So those rectangular tubes that are like different colors on the illustration are all separate and they're bound together. So the same way that like a thread is pretty weak and you can pull it and break it, but if you braid it into a rope, it becomes stronger. That's how this building worked as well. Because wind pushed on it so much, they needed the building to get smaller as it got taller. So the tubes are all different sizes, but they all lean on each other, like a huddle almost. And they're able to help hold up the building against those incredibly strong lake effect winds. It has a very unique elevator system in the building as well, because it's so large, they didn't want to have the whole building be elevators. It has a 104 car elevator system. 16 of those cars are double deckers. And they have local and express elevators. So if you work on a high floor, you can hop in that elevator and go to a sky lobby. So if you look at the illustration again, the colorful picture of the whole building put together, you can see that there's like some dark stripes. And then if you look at the real picture, you can see that there's kind of like some dark stripes on the picture as well. Those are the sky lobbies. So you could skip all the floors and go straight to a sky lobby and then jump on a different elevator to go up to your like local floor. So it was a way to get around the building really fast. Super innovative for the time. Now I'm going to look at another innovative building, but we're New Yorkers, so we got to keep coming back to New York. We know that's where all the good stuff is. And this is the Citicorp Center, or the Citibank building. And it's in Midtown Manhattan. It is on the east side, so if you drive in, you might see this building. If you're on the train and you're coming in and you're sitting on the right-hand side, you might see this building in the skyline. It's got a very unique top because of that triangular top. It's not the tallest building in the world at 915 feet, and built in 1977. It wasn't even the tallest in New York at the time. But its innovations lie at the very tippy top and at the very bottom. So let me show you the bottom of the building, because that's really where it's interesting. So these two pictures on the top are showing the ground floor. The entire building was built up on stilts. And it actually created a very unique problem that the designers did not figure out until after the building. And there was a big secret that went along with this building as it opened. So at the time, in 1977, the lead architect got a call, where his office got a call from a college student. And she was doing a report on this building, and she had done some calculations, and she figured out that if there was a quartering wind, and that's a wind that pushes on two sides of the building at the same time, so imagine a wind blowing at the corner instead of at one side, it could topple the building over because the stilts are in the middle of each side instead of the corners. Typically the corners are the strongest part of the building, but because of the building requirements, they had to leave room for a church at the bottom. So if you look at the top right corner, underneath the building, there's actually a church. They had to leave the corners open. So that was why they put it up on stilts. And they realized that they made the connections too flexible. So in secret, they hired a welding crew. They covered up all the windows. And at night, even while there were tenants in the building during the day, they started welding over all the connections and making the building stronger. Now, this whole routine was kept secret from the newspapers. They did make a plan with the city for like an emergency evacuation of what could happen. They were very nervous about getting hit with strong winds, and they should be, because this was all happening during hurricane season. And as they were doing this work, a hurricane was coming up the East Coast, and they were really afraid that they would cause a panic. Now, one thing that was going in their favor is there was actually a press strike. So the newspapers weren't printing, so they were able to sneak through. But even after they fixed the problem, this secret was held for about 20 years from the public. A very unique history to this building. Now in the bottom left corner, it looks like a weird letter E on its side. That's what's called a tuned mass dampener, and that's in the attic of the building. So basically a tuned mass dampener is a big heavy pendulum. The wind is going to act on a tall building, and it's going to make it sway in the breeze just a little bit, kind of like a tree does. So the tuned mass dampener swings against that sway, and it will slow it down. So that way people in tall buildings up at the high floors, they don't get like seasick, for lack of a better term. This was the first skyscraper to have a tuned mass dampener built into it. All right, we are in Italy now. We're in Rome. Built in the year 80, this is the first modern Colosseum. It had a 60,000 person capacity, over 80 entrances and exits. It covered 6 acres of land. It had a retractable roof. It had multiple use floors. They could have something for everybody. They had races, they had public plays, they had speeches, they had events, they had animals eating animals, animals eating people, people slaughtering each other. Just good, wholesome family fun, something for everybody, just like a modern sports arena where you could have the rodeo or a basketball game or the ice capades. Okay, kind of a little bit of a different time. So, different entertainment. Now, if you look at the top right corner, that's a model of what the seating plan looked like in just a little part of it. And it looks just like a modern stadium to me, where the entrance exit tunnels are, the pitch of the seating, just everything about it. Like if I said that this was a baseball stadium or a football stadium, you know, it probably would look just like one that you were familiar with. The bottom left is a picture of the floor. So it actually had a wooden floor at one point that was covered with dirt. It had trap doors in it with elevators, so people could like pop up in the middle and they could have lots of action. They could flood it and have naval battles. They just wanted to have a way to entertain the people. And best part, admission was free and it came with refreshments. Can't beat that. All right, back in New York City. So this is that other building that kind of looks like the Chrysler Building. This is the Empire State Building. And the reason that they look kind of similar is they were both built around the same time. All that trouble that Walter Chrysler went through to make sure that his building was the tallest building in the world, 11 months later, the Empire State Building stole that title in 1931 at 1,250 feet tall. So the Empire State Building remained the tallest building in the world for 41 years until the World Trade Center was built. The Empire State Building was used as an office building, but at one point they tried to use it like a little airport. So that picture in the middle on the bottom shows like a blimp or a Zeppelin trying to land on the top. They tried it literally once. It was so frightening, they never did it again. The top middle shows like the colorful lights at the top of the building. They'll change the lighting to go with the season, to go with special events, to go with holidays, to basically let people in the city know what's going on. So the lights at the top of the building, they always represent something. Now there's a picture on the bottom left of like a broken wall with people like standing. That's actually the side of the Empire State Building. In 1945, a B-25 bomber crashed into the 79th floor. This was such a well-built, overbuilt, strong building that the plane bounced off the side and landed on the sidewalk below. You could see it punched a hole in the wall, but they never even evacuated the building. People continued to work. Those are all reporters in the picture, basically taking pictures and writing the story about what happened. The Empire State Building was the tallest building in the world. For a while, it became the tallest building in New York City after the World Trade Center fell, and now it is the second tallest building in New York City again. All right, this is going to be the only private home that we're going to look at. This is a house called Falling Waters. It was built in Bear Run, Pennsylvania, which is kind of near Pittsburgh, and it's sometimes also known as the Kaufman House. So the Kaufmans used to own a chain of department stores, and they asked famous architect Frank Lloyd Wright if he would build them a house on their camp. So this was like land that they had that they used to go camping on, and they wanted to have a view of the waterfall. And Frank Lloyd Wright decided that he would actually build the house over the waterfall itself to incorporate the house into nature. That was his plan. So the terraces and ledges of the house kind of mimic the natural surroundings of the rocks. A lot of the stonework are all quarried from the stone in the area so that it would match. There's a lot of unfinished materials like wood and concrete and stone that's unpainted so that it would match the natural surrounding. A lot of floor-to-ceiling windows so that when you're inside, you can see outside and be with nature the whole time. In that top left picture, you can see the fireplace is sitting on what looks like a boulder. That's actually the stone that they built the house on. So if you look at the picture outside, that stone continues up through the house and becomes the base of the fireplace. Very cool. There's a staircase in the living room that you can kind of see in the bottom left picture. It's a little hard to make out because it's so small and dark in the shadow there. But there's a staircase that comes down to a little porch that's right at the brink of the waterfall so that they could still go down, have access to the waterfall, and enjoy it. All right, we are in St. Louis. So this is the Gateway Arch, and it was named because St. Louis is the gateway city. So it had a really important role in westward expansion. And this is like the symbolic gateway to the west. So if we were all pioneers and we were heading from the East Coast to the West Coast to get rich mining for gold, St. Louis was like your last stop before you hit the wilderness. So it was like our last chance to buy food and supplies, take a bath, sleep in a real bed. After that, you were really in the wilderness. So the arch is that symbolic gateway to the west to emphasize the important role that St. Louis had in westward expansion. Now, the Gateway Arch, built in 1965, is the tallest of all of our national monuments. It's 630 feet tall and wide. So it's as tall as it is wide. It's very weird to construct. It's a very unusual shape. It's called a catenary curve, and it's the shape that a chain or a rope would take if you just let it hang. So the Gateway Arch had to be built in two pieces. So each side were built separately to meet in the middle. So if you see the two pictures on the top of construction, you can see there's this thing, it's labeled as a creeper derrick. A creeper derrick was a platform that they designed and built to climb the building, to hold the workers, to hold the tools, to hold those materials so that they could build. And after they completed each section, it would just continue to climb the building. And it would act like an elevator on the outside of the building to get the workers up where they needed to be. Now, when they were building this, local newspapers did not think that it was going to work. They thought that the whole thing was going to be a mess and break, and they didn't think it was going to be a successful project. They kept drawing cartoons of like the two sides missing each other and going off into the distance forever. So they wanted to make a big show of completing it, and when they went to put in the last piece in front of like the city celebration and like the news cameras and everybody, they flew in that last piece and they tried to put it in, and it didn't fit because the sun was hitting one side of the arch and not the other, and it heated it up and the metal expanded, and they tried to put it in place and it just wouldn't fit. So they had the fire department hose off the building so that they could wedge it in and complete the structure. Now, to get people up to the observation deck, if you look in the bottom left corner, you can see there's people up in the arch in an observation deck. They had to figure out how to make an elevator that would go up around a curved structure, and they turned to Walt Disney. And Walt Disney helped design an elevator that kind of was self-leveling the same way a Ferris wheel car is self-leveling. So as it went around that curve, it kind of pivoted and it stayed so that the ground didn't turn out from underneath you. And since we were talking about Disney, I'm going to go on one more stop, and we're going to Disney World. Well, we're going to Epcot. It's kind of like the educational version of Disney. It's a cruel joke. Anyway, this shape that we're looking at, people call it the golf ball. The ride is called Spaceship Earth, but the thing is called a geodesic dome. So a geodesic dome was built designed by a guy named Buckminster Fuller. He's that guy in the middle picture there. And he designed it as a structure that can be built using all of its support on the outside. So all of those little shapes that lock together can support the entire structure. You don't need walls or columns or anything on the inside. So it's really great for places where you need empty space. So like an amusement park ride needed to all be empty so they didn't have to build around something. He's standing in front of a civic center, so think like basketball arena or hockey arena, where you don't want to have anything coming down and getting in the way of anybody's view. And in the bottom picture, that yellow building is like a storage shed. It's like a highway department storage shed, so it's a nice big open space where they can put large machines and store things, where they don't have to worry about bumping into any walls. And of course, probably the most familiar would be like playground equipment. So you see that guy sitting on top of his playground equipment at home. And all of those little hubs lock those, they're called struts. The bars are called struts. Lock all those together into those triangular shapes, and that's what gives it its strength. So I'm going to say that this is the end of part 1. We're going to do a part 2 as well. So, the next trip will be all new places, and in the future, you're going to get little assignments that go along with it. All right? Bon voyage. I'll see you all later.